Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'm Scott Brand, your host of the GoRhody Sports Network. We have a great show tonight. We're talking about Simone Biles, who is the greatest of all time as a gymnast. And we're talking about the case of the Twisties. What is the Twisties? From what I know, it's a mental block. In her case, as a gymnast, she could be very high up in the air and just block and not know where she is and could actually fall. And who better to talk about this than Georgia Miller, who is a sports mental performance coach, and she's here right now. How are you, Georgia?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, Scott. I'm excited for our conversation.
And you're a sports mental performance coach. You have clients or athletes that are actually gymnasts. I looked at your resume, and the company that you work for is phenomenal. And you were telling me that you're just on Zoom today with someone from Australia.
Yes, yeah, we get athletes from all over the world, so it's pretty cool to work with the different cultures.
Hi, I'm Georgia Miller, one of the mental performance coaches here at Peak Performance Sports in Orlando. I received my MA with an emphasis in athletic counseling at Springfield College in Massachusetts. I was also the graduate assistant volleyball coach there. I specialize in working with all of our youth and high school athletes here at Peak Performance Sports, as well as all of our sport parents.
Wow, that's a great video you have there. Who is a sports mental performance coach?
So my job as a mental performance consultant is to work with athletes on enhancing their performance and helping them overcome any mental blocks or just faulty beliefs and faulty thinking that can impact their performance and their confidence. We're breaking down a lot of perfectionism, a lot of fear of failure. Maybe an athlete is injured and they're having a hard time coming back from that. And so my day-to-day looks like meetings with athletes or teams. So sometimes I'm meeting with a team, running a team seminar, creating a mental performance program for them, or I'm just meeting one-on-one with athletes, either in person or on Zoom or FaceTime with them. And I work with athletes of all ages right now. So I would say sweet spot is 14 through 22. But sometimes we'll be on the younger end working with athletes who are as young as 10. It's really young though. We recommend 12 to start. And then some older athletes who are about like 50. So it's a really fun and satisfying job, and it keeps the day busy for sure.
I watched the Lifetime movie of Simone, and did you know that she had a sports mental performance coach?
Did not know, but I would only assume that all of those elite athletes at that level have one.
Let's get started with the big $10 million question. What is a case of the Twisties? Can you break that down for us?
Yeah. So the Twisties, like what you said at the beginning, is a mental block where gymnasts completely lose sight of where they're at in space. A lot of it has to do with their orientation. And so let's say a gymnast is running full speed at a vault, hurling themselves above this obstacle. They're doing all these flips and twists in the air, and they don't know where they're going to land. That can be very scary for them. So Jordan Weber explained this very well. She was part of the Fantastic Five, the Fierce Five is what they called them, the group of the 2012 Olympics. Yeah. She explained it as, a lot of gymnasts go through it. They don't know where the ground is. They don't know where they're at in space. They don't know how many twists and flips they have left in their series. So it's just a very unknown feeling for them. And it can be really scary when you're up in the air going full speed.
And what causes the Twisties?
A lot of things can cause it. I would say if you aren't fully committed to doing your trick or your routine, that can cause it, because all of a sudden you're in the air and you're hesitating a little bit. So that can cause it. Maybe a little bit of fear there, fear of getting injured. And so now you start hesitating. Maybe you're going safe. You're running at whatever skill you're doing not at full speed. Maybe you're going a little safer, playing cautious, right? So maybe fear there, stress, typically under pressure, on the stress and how you're perceiving all the pressure situations and how your body is responding to that can have an impact. And there is a physical side of it too. I like to compare the Twisties to the Yips in like baseball and golf, which yeah, we can dive into that too. But with the Twisties, there is a physical component to it. So like if your vestibular system in your brain is a little bit off, and maybe some chemicals are off in that inner ear where your balance is really found, that can mess with it too. But mainly it's in mental.
My homework is vestibular. I'm going to look that up and get back to you on that. Maybe,
Yeah.
I'll write it in the comments on the YouTube channel. That's a $10,000 word that I should have known before I got on here.
It's inner ear,
Okay.
The system in your inner ear, it deals with balance and your proprioception.
All right. Well, I'm going to use that all day tomorrow.
Great. Yeah.
Just to sound like I had a few other areas. A break of routine. In her case, it was during COVID, and she was performing in empty auditoriums, just like college basketball and all the other college world. And then all of a sudden, she goes to Tokyo, and now there's people in the stands, and that's definitely what do you think of that as a possibility as well?
Yeah. Well, I can't speak for Simone and say that she was under a lot of stress and pressure, right? But she is one of the best, if not the best gymnast in the world.
Yes.
And she had a lot of expectations going into the Tokyo Olympics. And so, yeah, I'm sure she was feeling some sort of stress and some sort of pressure. And when you're in the air and you're doing all these really fine movements, and all of a sudden you just hesitate a little bit and you start questioning yourself and maybe even doubting, it can be really hard to get that back, especially knowing that all these people are there watching you.
Yes. Also, her main shtick is doing the most difficult moves. And I'm going by a Lifetime movie. I'm sorry if that
that's good.
But I saw her coaches and they were pushing her, and she didn't want to do it at first. Now it seems like that you can't stop her from doing some of the things. She does things that men don't even try to do. So when you have such a difficult, intricate type of move, doesn't that increase the chance of a twisty?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. If you have this very difficult sequence, and these different sequences are kind of stacked with each other and they only differ by a certain twist, or maybe you're going in a different direction, your body has to memorize that and know exactly where it's going. And so let's say if like one part of your routine is just slightly off, you could easily be second guessing yourself going into the next. And if you start hesitating, like the tricks that Simone are doing require a lot of athleticism. She needs to be going very fast. She needs to be punching hard and jumping very high. So if she's hesitating just a little bit and she's not getting the height that she needs to do these tricks, well, that can be very scary. And so that can cause the twisties as well.
Now, first of all, I didn't know that much about the twisties, but she's had it before. She's had incidents before. So if that stays in your head and lingers in your head, sometimes it creeps in like other things in life mentally in opportune times.
Well, and I was reading an interview that she said, and she didn't have much to comment on her twisties at Tokyo, but you're right, she had them before. But from my understanding, I was listening to an interview with her coach, Amy Borman. And this was the first time that Simone experienced it on all 4 events. So I think it was to Simone's advantage that she has experienced the twisties before. I'm sure she had a process of how she got through them. But if this was the first time she experienced it on beam and bars also, then that, might freak her out even more because she doesn't necessarily have a process on how to get through that.
Yeah, that's interesting. Now, in your world, do you have any parallels of clients that you have?
I've worked with a lot of baseball and softball players who have the yips. Usually we see that in catchers and pitchers with their throws. Golfers can get the yips a lot with their golf swing. Typically in their short game with putting, they might have a 2-foot putt that they miss every single time. And then I actually just started working with a football player who has the yips. He's a lawn snapper. And we've seen it in football kickers before too. So it is everywhere, but in their own ways in each individual sport.
What a name, the Yips.
Yeah, I know. Like,
I
where
know
did they
what
come up
it
with that?
is.
Yeah, I don't know the history on that name.
And here's another issue that's come about, the danger of it in as a gymnast to have a condition of the twisties. What can
Yeah.
actually happen if things go wrong besides maybe an ankle injury, which she did have in her development? And it also goes to the stigma when people called her a quitter. And maybe if they understood not just the mental aspect, which she embraced, but there's some really bad things that could happen when you have a mental block and you're doing what she doesn't. Don't you agree on
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, absolutely. You could get seriously injured. There was a gymnast back in the late 70s. Her name was Elena, I believe. And she was elite. She was representing the Soviet Union at the time. And her coach was pushing her and pushing her and pushing her to come back early from an injury. And so she wasn't getting as much height as she needed to do these amazing tricks that she was working on. And she landed wrong and immediately became a quadriplegic. And so with gymnasts, you are risking your lives doing these awesome tricks. So if you, and I like to compare it to NASCAR. We use a lot of NASCAR analogies in the sports psych field. So and this kind of ties into the stigma aspect with it as well. A NASCAR, they're going 200 miles per hour around this track. If they don't have a break, then of course everyone's going to be like, oh yeah, you can't drive. That's suicide. And most of us can relate to that. Most of us can drive. We know what that feels like. We know what it would be like to not have a break. That's very scary. And you can actually physically see a break that's missing. But this is what it's like with gymnasts who have the twisties. They are going full speed with no break. They don't know how to stop themselves. They don't know where they're landing. And it's harder for us to understand, one, because most of us aren't elite gymnasts. We don't know what it feels like to be hurling our body and doing all these crazy moves. And we can't see it in their mind. So I think that's where a lot of the stigma comes from. And I know Simone was getting a lot of backlash on it, but obviously she's this elite gymnast. She's not going to pull out lightly. That's not a decision that she would take lightly to pull out of the Olympics by any means.
Let's talk about her comeback. Now, she came back after about 2 years hiatus. She did pretty well the first or second time back. How hard was that? Some people just take it for granted. She's the best in the world and she's Simone. That's what she's supposed to do. But really, let's be honest about this. With what was going on with the twisties and the long wait and then going into the unknown, how hard was it? How remarkable was it what she was able to accomplish?
Well,
Successfully, elite.
For all Olympians, right? They're training every day for 4 years, for some events just a few seconds. And so to have that just completely fall away, I mean, I can only imagine what she felt like. And I know she was getting a lot of support from her teammates, and she has some great supportive parents, just listening to interviews that I've heard. And she had some great supportive coaches at the time, which I think tremendously helped her. But yeah, I can only imagine how hard it was. And I'm sure there was a lot of breakdown. I'm sure there was a lot of talking and reflecting and bringing it back to the basics for her. But like I said, since she had been through the twisties before, I'm sure that helped her. She already kind of had a process of what to do to get through it. But it was never on a big stage like this in front of the entire world, essentially. So that just added a whole different component to it this time.
Well, I'm glad that you commented on that because I think it's overlooked and the expectations are just way too high on her. Do you deal with any of your athletes who are have mental health issues? Like, for instance, Simone has ADHD, from what I hear. Do you deal with that? It sounds very challenging, your job. Without that.
Yeah. So mental health, that's a very big umbrella. And at Peak Performance Sports, we're mainly focusing on performance enhancement. And I'm not a licensed psychologist or a psychiatrist. So if I come across an athlete, and I'm trained to recognize the signs and symptoms of like depression and anxiety disorders and eating disorders, but I don't have the skill base and knowledge to help an athlete through that. So I was just working with an athlete who has an eating disorder. And so I asked her if I can reach out to her parents and we can get her some extra help. And so we did that, and we referred her out. I'm still working with her on the mental performance aspect of it, but her nutrition and her eating habits were greatly impacting that. And so we take a big holistic view here. So if I see, or in mental performance coaches in general, right, if we see those, we are obligated to refer them out. So yeah, I'm working with a lot of athletes who have ADHD and who might have like general anxiety disorders. So
Yeah.
we're working with them through that, absolutely. But do we dive deep into that? No, I let another expert do that.
This is the part of the program I couldn't wait. You've already talked about this, is the other sports, the Yips.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll throw out some names of players. One of them, I'm a New York Yankee fan, and you're younger than me. His name was Chuck Nalblout, star second baseman, went to New York. All of a sudden, he couldn't throw the ball to first base as a second baseman. And it's happened with pitchers that are phenomenally on spot, and then just something happens where they're off by 10 feet in pitches from that. So with that, let's talk about the other sports that you were saying. I know we brought it up to begin with, but it is very common, and I think in other sports, another sport is basketball, and maybe I'm off on this, but foul shooting is a problem. The team, this GoRhody Rhode Island basketball team 2 years ago, they had the worst foul shooting team in the country, just about. And the coach says it starts to get contagious. So good foul shooters were having their worst foul shooting. And what about those things? Does it go into other areas besides golf and baseball? Is it just about everything, or is it just a few things?
Yeah, no, I would say every sport has their own form of the yips. I was working with a basketball player at one point, and I think he had the yips with his layups. I mean, every single open layup he would miss. And it became just this mental block for him. And so like your free throw shots that you were talking about, quarterbacks can sometimes get the yips. Kickers, that's big. Soccer players shooting, penalty kicks, they can get it. So it really shows up in its own form in every sport. But yeah, and a big part of that is this fear of failure. And like what you said, it can be contagious. So that whole team might have taken on that identity of, we're bad at free throws. And then it became this pressure to make the free throw. And so they were getting really lost in those outcomes and really afraid of making mistakes.
And conversely, the same team a year later with a different personnel, they were one of the best foul shooting teams in the country. And some of the players overachieved. They weren't such great foul shooters. And I felt like they were going to make their foul shots, just as I felt the year before that they weren't going to make their foul shots, no matter who was on the line. So there's some kind of group mentality involved in team sports like basketball.
Yeah, absolutely. And right, we form this individual identity, but also, and the media plays a huge role in this too. If the media is putting labels on let's say the GoRhody basketball team that they are bad at free throws, well, it's really hard to not adopt that identity.
Do you feel there's a stigma in gymnastics with what Simone dealt with? Was she stigmatized?
Yeah, I do. And I think that goes back to like our NASCAR example, right? I don't think a lot of people understand it because it's a lot harder to see. All of us experience some sort of stress, some sort of anxiety. Maybe we have some doubts. Maybe our confidence gets questioned. But for some of us, that's in your 9-to-5 office job, not in front of anyone. And for some of us, it's on this huge world elite national stage And it's in front of all these people. So everybody has it, and it's just figuring out your process and how to really handle it in those moments. And all athletes, all people are going to feel uncomfortable at times. But what matters is what you're choosing to come back to in those moments when you are uncomfortable or when you are stressed. It's really easy to feel confident when you're playing well, but it's a whole different thing to feel confident when you have a few mistakes thrown in there or a few comments from outsiders. So yeah, I think that there is a big stigma around it nowadays, and that you're mentally weak if you're getting help. But you wouldn't wait until you have an injury to start going to a strength and conditioning coach. So why would you wait until you have a mental block to go see a mental performance coach?
She had a bout with the Twisties. She has a bout with it. It shouldn't be past tense. And back in the day, I think she's helped the sport quite a bit by embracing it. It was hushed. It was a hushed tone if someone had the Twisties. Now, she went as far after she had the incident to go on Instagram and show herself falling backwards. And she also said that she wanted this to happen. If this didn't happen in her life, she would be, in a way, disappointed. She's glad that it happened in her life. It made her a stronger person and helped other people. So
yeah, which I admire her for that.
So they're saying while there's no common cure for the Twisties, many gymnasts benefit from taking a step back, and that's what she did. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, it's definitely different for everybody, and that's exactly what I would do with my gymnast. Is let's take a step back. Let's get down to the basics. Let's start doing some somersaults and some cartwheels until you feel more comfortable doing a back handspring, and then the next and the next and the next. And then we're really redefining success along with that. Okay, if you did 10 cartwheels today, awesome, that's successful. But we really need to, again, redefine what success is. If you're used to doing all these crazy moves, we really need to tone it down and just take it one step at a time. So absolutely taking a step back, talking about what's stressful, having a great support system in your life is huge. And it sounds like Simone had that, which is great.
And then a little more on the Twisties. She was supposed to do a 2.5 twist in the air, and after launching, she was airborne and she lost her bearings and completed 1.5. And that's pretty much when she knew something was wrong. So just doing 2.5 is incredible, but it just stopped just like that. I found that to be interesting how precise it was, the way they did that.
Yeah, and those gymnasts their body awareness is crazy. It's awesome, and they can feel when they're just a little slightly off. And so when you notice that, and then maybe if you're starting to overthink it, you're looking to avoid that, you're searching for a feeling, then the Twisties can just really snowball after that.
When you use the word overthink, I think in all of these sports that the athletes that you represent, one of the biggest issues is overthinking. I know I've done that, not just in sports and in everything. And in sports, it's just amplified to a higher level. So just like you said, overthinking is really, if you could get them in a way in the right place. Are you able to do that with your skills?
Yeah. And I think, it's different for all athletes and how you get them to stop overthinking. I like to use the example, because we're all younger, we're all watching cartoons, right? Most of us know the little devil on your shoulder and the little angel on your shoulder. And that's how I explain it. Like, think of this little devil on your shoulder as your worries, your doubts, your comparisons that you're making. Well, we really need to start working on your angel voice and interrupting that and telling yourself exactly what you want to do, and putting doubts into your doubts, helping you instill confidence, and really seeking the truth and not all of those little murmurs. They also talk a lot about talking to yourself versus listening to that little inner critic. Because once that little inner critic gets going, it's really important that you have something to come back to, that you can stop it and interrupt it.
And who she is. She's 26 years old. I didn't realize that she's over the hill.
Yeah.
And why is that? When they're 15 or 16, they're primed. But if you're an NBA basketball player, your prime is 27 or so, oftentimes. Why is it's the 15 and 16 that is the prime? What makes it different for that sport?
Yeah, so gymnasts, right? Well, when you're younger, you're lighter, more flexible, maybe too. For females, right, we kind of go through two puberties. One usually like around high school age, and then when you stop beating your body up, like especially female college athletes, usually after college, okay, then we get hips, right? Because our body's like, okay, I'm a little bit more safer to fully develop now. But I love that Simone is still pushing herself and still performing at 26. I think it's very inspiring. And I just listened to an interview the other day, and she was saying how she wants to be that inspiration for younger athletes. Let them know that you don't have to be 16 years old and reach your peak in gymnastics. You can keep going with it. And I think that puts a lot of pressure on young gymnasts that, oh my gosh, if I'm not the best that I am right now at 15 years old, then I'm screwed. I'm done. But that's not the way it has to be. But I would say that just normally, like, you're lighter, right? And you beat your body up. Gymnasts have insane practice schedules. Their practices are 4 hours long every day. So like normally when I'm meeting with my gymnasts, it's literally on their way to practice or in the car on their way home, or they're just like taking a break and they're in the back of the gym on FaceTime with me. So their practices are really long. They're spending a lot of hours. They're doing these insane, intense moves. So that's usually why they're at their peak when they're younger. But I think Simone is doing a great job at inspiring the younger ones to keep going if that's what you want to do.
She's carrying a lot of weight on her back, the mental health component as well, that she's helping. People are already saying that she's helped them so much. It's unclear what technique athletes must use to prevent the twisties. This is interesting. I think this is right in your wheelhouse. Mental rehearsals can help athletes get into the right frame of mind. Do you find that to be helpful? It seems like you just told me one with the angel and the devil on your shoulders. Is that a rehearsal?
I think that's more of an analogy, but what they're
Okay.
talking about, what they're talking about is, I mean, there's so many different names for it. I normally say imagery or visualization. And it's really great for gymnasts to do because their moves are so detailed. But really slowing it down, imagining yourself performing your moves exactly the way you want it to before you go out and do it. That way you're seeing how you want it to be executed, and it's just naturally going to prepare you more, and you're going to feel more confident going into it to be able to execute it exactly how you imagined it. I think it's a life skill that everybody should be able to have. We should all be able to visualize ourselves doing successful things. It's just going to help with your confidence. It's a great mental warm up for you. You know, we're always warming up our bodies physically. Okay, well, how are you getting mentally prepared? So yeah, there's a lot of good research on visualization as well.
What I wanted to do now, there's a guy named Gage Dwyers. Have you heard of him? He's a gymnast. He was 21. He was on his way to making it to the Olympics. He was national champion, and he had the twisties. But he was right at the top of his game. He was pretty much at the same time as Simone in 2021 when she was involved with some things. And out of nowhere, his skills vanished. And he still, to this day, he didn't even communicate with his coach what was going on. His coach had to surmise that there was something else going on, but he lost his skills. He still doesn't know what's happened. He had to retire. He moved to Florida and he works for the Lion King. It sounds like I'm making this up at Walt Disney World. It's not every story has a happy ending is what I'm bringing out. And And this is something that really shows even more so what she and others have done to overcome the twisties. Now Simone isn't the only one, from what I understand, who has overcome the twisties. She's the most famous, but sometimes it just doesn't work out, and I brought that up just to show, and I'm hoping that his life turns out for the better, and he finds something, even if he's not able to be in the Olympics, which was what his dream. But that was something I wanted to end with, and as a cautionary tale, and to
it definitely shows how hard it is to come back from some of these things. And I think a huge part of it too is how much of your identity is wrapped up in being an athlete. If that's the only thing that you know, then if something goes slightly wrong with your performance, you're probably going to be feeling like a crappy person, and your self-esteem is going to be really impacted by that. But if you use sports as a way to show your personality through that, and know that it's just something that you do, it's not fully who you are, I think that's where a lot of help with it comes from.
Well, you've just been so great for our viewers, and I'm urging our 10 million subscribers. Okay, I'm lying. It's not 10 million.
I was like, 10 million is a lot, Scott.
You told me visualizing. I'm visualizing what is like 10 million subscribers. But I'm urging them to go to your Twitter, which I believe is Peak Sports Coach.
Yeah, Peak Sports Coach. Yeah, and we're big on Instagram too.
Instagram also, same handle.
Yeah, it's Peak Sports, I believe.
But basically, thanks so much, Georgia, for talking about the GOAT. It doesn't sound like a great thing when we call people goats, but it is talking about the great GOAT, Simone, who overcame a case of the twisties, and for shedding light and understanding what she actually did. And I think it's going to be very helpful and interesting for other people. And just because she's the greatest of all time doesn't mean that everyone knows everything about her or the twisties. And what you're doing out there is just a great thing. And I could tell you love it. So,
thank you. Yeah, I'm so passionate about it. I wake up just excited every day.
Talk about it.
Yeah.
I always tell people, if you like what you've seen, then subscribe, like it, give a thumbs up, make a comment. If you didn't like it, well, don't say anything.
Then don't do anything about it.
Don't do anything.
Well, thank you so much, Scott. I really appreciate it. I love doing podcasts. I love talking about this stuff and just helping build that awareness for people who don't have a whole lot of knowledge on it. I think it's really important, and I just think it's great that this is what you're doing.
Okay. Thanks again, Georgia.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.